Okay, welcome. I'm assuming you've got a black screen on there. Looks like my HDMI cable may be going bad, so give me just a second to try to troubleshoot that. Funny how it seems to work just fine until 30 seconds before trying to go live. Okay, that didn't do it either. Okay, let me reset one piece of equipment here that might be the culprit. Okay. That's a little bit suspicious. Okay, can everybody see the video now?
Yes.
All right. Okay, cool. Let me throw this link right in here. Give you the Slido we'll be using. Okay, well, sorry about that. I'll have to see. I'm not sure if it's my cable or my video compositing box. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about effective daily stand-ups, and I will probably use the terms interchangeably with daily stand-up and face-to-face, and we'll talk a little bit about why we might call it face-to-face. But first we want to start with a video here, just a brief kind of discussion, a cartoon, better looking version of me as a drawn character about daily stand-up, daily face-to-face meeting.
One of the most common practices you'll see in an Agile team is the daily stand-up meeting. Typically, this is a 15-minute meeting where everyone gets together to make sure everyone knows what has been done since the last meeting and what everyone plans to do before the next meeting. To keep the meetings short and focused, most teams conduct them standing up. There are a lot of teams who have what they call a daily stand-up that don't get much value out of the meetings. If your team is doing a daily stand-up because you've heard it's the way to be agile, you probably need to spend some time discussing why you're actually doing those meetings. Agile doesn't say anything about having a daily stand-up meeting. Teams that don't know what Agile values and principles are behind a particular practice are unlikely to really get the full benefit out of those practices. So why do teams do these daily meetings? What is the principle behind the practice? Consider this Agile principle. The most effective and efficient method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. A short daily in-person meeting is a very effective way of making sure that the entire team has at least one opportunity each day to talk face-to-face. I like to see teams call these meetings the daily face-to-face meeting because it keeps people focused on the principle behind the meeting rather than the physical position of the attendees. When teams don't realize that they are trying to follow the principle of face-to-face communication, they end up doing all kinds of weird things that often defeat the purpose of the meetings. For example, I worked with one team where people would call into a conference line for the daily stand-up meeting every day and then walk into the team room 2 minutes after the meeting completed, put on their headphones so no one could talk to them, and start on writing code. They were so focused on the practice of having a 15-minute meeting that they entirely missed the principle behind the practice. As a result, they removed the very thing that Agile said was valuable, face-to-face communication. Needless to say, this team was doing a lot of other stuff that sounded like a highly functional Agile team. On the surface, they had a lot of practices you'd find in an Agile team, but once you started digging into things, it was apparent that much of what was being done ran contrary to the Agile principles and values. They weren't reaching anywhere near their full potential because there was no foundation beneath their practices. Now, the reality is that many teams are distributed. Some people may not be able to fly across the world every day for a 15-minute face-to-face meeting. Teams that are trying to follow the principle of face-to-face communication will tend toward using video conferencing for their daily meetings because it's the next best way to communicate. When you're driven by Agile principles, you can easily evolve your practices to deal with new conditions and changes. If you want to really develop software efficiently using Agile, you have to make sure that everyone knows the principles behind each practice. And nowhere is this more true than your daily face-to-face meetings. Do you have an interesting story about a daily stand-up meeting? If so, please leave it in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, please take a moment to like it, subscribe, and share it with people on your team.
Okay, so that video can be found at youtube.com/SmartShed if you're looking for it. It's interesting how stand-up being referenced more to the idea that the meeting occurs regularly rather than being standing up. I had always heard it as being stand-up, so you keep everybody focused and don't take very long. Okay, so those are some thoughts on the daily stand-up meeting, daily face-to-face meeting. I was working with a team one time, and we'd get together for a few weeks and then we'd all be remote. And we were just kind of starting up, and so they were setting up their, the daily stand-up meeting, and we had been in person, so we all conduct the meeting standing up. And then everybody went home and everybody's on video conference. We had virtual team rooms where people were all day long. We worked in these virtual team rooms. We could jump around different team rooms if we need to work with different people. And so we got ready to do the daily stand-up, and everybody stood up. And so we had this nice view of just like from here to here, you couldn't see anybody's face because everybody was standing up in front of their computer. So after we thought about it for a little while, we realized Agile wasn't really pushing us toward belly-to-belly communication. And so we thought we might be better off to sit down where we could actually get face-to-face, even if we were calling it the daily stand-up. And I like that story because it helps point out what we're trying to do is face-to-face communication. And if we end up with belly-to-belly communication because we're standing up, that might indicate that we're doing something that doesn't actually follow the principle that we say we're trying to follow. So, question for you, what do you call your daily meeting? Is it called the daily scrum? Whoops, I misspelled daily. Daily stand-up, daily face-to-face, or daily airing of grievances? Okay, it looks like most of us are in the daily stand-up or maybe daily scrum. I would encourage you to think about, if you were to call your meeting your daily face-to-face, would that change the perception of what the meeting's for? And would that be a good way? I'm not saying everybody you should go change it necessarily, but just think about that, because you may find a simple language change can change how people approach it and what they expect to get out of it. So that's just an idea, something to consider. Daily airing of grievances, I would not recommend. That may not be the best thing. You might get that as a negative thing. Daily huddle. Oh, I like that. That's good. Call it the stand-up because we don't have a daily. Oh, well, that works too. Okay, what is the biggest pain point of your whatever this meeting is, daily or if you don't meet every day, whatever that meeting is for coordinating things? Call our engineers, connect and stand up. Sync up meeting. Okay, cool. So in the Slido, what is, and here, let me paste that again for anybody that doesn't have it. It should have popped up for you, but if it doesn't show up, you can go to that, or you can go to the QR code if it's easy. So just a round table of the 3 questions. Okay, so sometimes it can run too long. Brevity, trying to keep it short is difficult. Making it a status meeting, so it sounds like it's switching over, just everybody giving the status. Attendance, getting people to show up. Blocked work is the biggest problem. Getting people to share actual valuable information, that's a really big one. It takes longer than 15 minutes. Not enough focus on getting stories to done. That's very important. Status updates, no commitment to finish. People not getting it, so not knowing why. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Reverting to status updates. So oftentimes it becomes a status update where everybody just tells the Scrum Master what they did for the last 24 hours or last 8 work hours or however long it's been. Transparency, information shared is not focused or structured. A side conversation, one person does all the talking. People just telling what they did. We have a 30-minute stand-up. It's first 15 is for the team to an icebreaker grind through the day. The next 15 is for status and dependency talk. Okay. Keeping everyone focused on their plans for the day instead of talking about what was already done. So I like this, and we're going to talk about that because if we just tell everybody what we've done in a way that does not help us prepare for the day, we may just be looking in the rearview mirror instead of looking forward to what we can actually improve. Team members in multiple endeavors, first they have to prioritize their availability. Identify daily goals that we can achieve. Okay, so these are all I mean, these are all very common things. I'm sure if you typed one thing in, you probably saw lots of things as like, oh, yep, I've been there, experienced that. One thing I will point out is that if your daily face-to-face meetings are effective, you're probably going to have, they may be a little bit messy. And that's not necessarily bad. If you're getting out of them what you want, if you're getting value out of them, it may be a little bit of a messy process, especially if the team is actually owning it and moving forward with it. And so one thing, and we're thinking about the way that the daily face-to-face meetings are operating, one thing I'd encourage you to do is don't confuse messiness with being not effective. You can have something that looks really, really messy from the outside, but can be very, very effective for the team. So be thinking in terms of what the team's actually getting. Is it achieving its goal, even if it looks a little bit messy? And if somebody else comes into your daily stand-up and goes, oh, this is chaos, it's not for them, right? It's for the team. If the team's getting value from it, then it may actually be working. And so what I want to encourage you, that thought process is, it's not about looking in a certain way. It's about, does the team actually get value from this? Okay, so daily scrum. Now, as we go through this, I'm doing this a little bit differently. Instead of doing a game show thing at the end, we're going to ask questions as we go. So we'll see leaderboards. So you can participate as we go through it with the game show questions spread throughout the whole talk. So we're going to be talking about daily scrum here, but I'm play to win. We'll be giving away a copy of my book, Starting Agile, to the lucky winner. And so the first question here. So join the quiz. Join the link. I'll throw it out here. So keep this link up. And I don't remember how many questions we have, but they're spread throughout the whole thing. And you can join later too, but I'd encourage you to join now because it increases your chances of winning. My daughter's using Slido for she's doing a presentation in an organic chemistry class, and it had to be interactive. So she's got some questions and quizzes and stuff throughout it. So she ran it on our family, tested it on our family last night. And I think I managed to get all the questions right, but most of that may have just been by luck. Okay, give you a few more seconds. Encourage everybody to join. And go ahead and join. If you haven't, you can still join even if we're in the middle of it. So the first question is, what is a scrum in rugby? Is it how the owners plan the game? Is it like a timeout, but people throw things at the players? It starts the play like a kickoff or jump ball. It's how the teams plan before they're starting a play, or it involves running around pretending to fly on a broom. I think that last one is quibbage, I think is what it's called. Okay, so it's actually, and these two were close, so it looks like everybody's in the same ballpark, but I believe, from my understanding of rugby, it's actually how they kick off the play. They've decided what they're going to do, but it's the point where they get together, and I think they do something like, let me see if we got a picture of it here. Okay, there's our leaderboard in the top side. So they make this, I think it's called a scrum, and they throw the ball in between, and that's how they start playing. So that's my understanding of rugby. If we've got any rugby experts here, I may miss some nuance of it. But it's the thing that actually kicks things off into play. It's not so much, and this is where I think if we think of the term scrum as being, oh, it's where we plan everything out. Not that there's no aspect of it, but it's really more of, in rugby, it's more of how we kick things off. So whether we call it daily scrum versus daily stand-up, those are going to be, for most places, those are similar. For Scrum, it's the way Scrum kicks off the work for the next 24 hours. So time box to 15 minutes, inspects progress toward the sprint goal, and adjusts the backlog. As far as just a daily stand-up in other Agile settings, it can be a little bit more generic as a brief meeting to coordinate the team's activities for the day to maximize what is delivered. And I really like that definition because it keeps us focused on how we're delivering value, not just like asking the 3 questions, which we'll talk about in a minute. So daily stand-up is more where we're going to be talking, but you'll hear it called scrum, different things like that. And like I said, what I really like to do is replace the stand-up with face-to-face, because this is the principle behind why we're having this. So what's the point? Well, if we're trying to find the point, we ought to look back and say, if we're following Agile, where should we look? Probably should look at the Agile values and principles. So, which principle best supports having some type of daily meeting? What would you say? And there's not a right or wrong answer here. These are just some principles that you might think, you might be able to say, a daily meeting would help us better follow the principle. And Jess, no, I would say it's not terrible that you hate the 3 questions. If those are not helping your team be efficient, then they're probably very, very painful. Although some teams may find it very efficient to use the 3 questions. Okay, most efficient, effective method of conveying information is face-to-face conversation. That might be a good reason to call this the daily face-to-face meeting. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. That might be another thing that would drive us to having some type of place that we can make sure we're all synced up for the day and working together. That also might drive us having team rooms with cross-functional teams working in them. So these are all reasons that we could use to kind of justify, or not just justify, but to try to reasons that we may want to have some type of daily meeting where we get together to move stuff forward. So the best way to communicate is face-to-face. It's where we get the idea of a daily face-to-face meeting. Now, I want to show you something here. And you may have seen this. If you know where this came from, don't type it in the chat. So this was, and it was typed on a typewriter and I've blown it up, so it's kind of hard to see. But this was the rider attached to a band. And when they were coming to a venue, the people doing all the setup stuff would get this. And it's what had to be set up in their green room. So you need a bunch of towels, a bunch of cups for drinks, potato chips, nuts, pretzels, M&Ms. Warning, absolutely no brown ones. No brown M&Ms. And then 12 Reese's Pieces peanut butter cups, 12 assorted Dannon yogurt on ice. So very detailed of what exactly they were asking for. Now, my question for you here, and this is more just a trivia question. So get ready. The question is going to be, who actually had this on their rider? No brown M&Ms. Who had that on their concert rider? Was it Taylor Swift, the Monkees, Van Halen, Aerosmith, or Bon Jovi? And I am going to bring this back around to the idea of a daily face-to-face meeting. Okay, looks like most of us were on the Aerosmith, but I think it actually was Van Halen from everything that I've found. So got some rock trivia there, which puts Jake into the top spot here. So the M&Ms, the logic behind this, because it just sounds, at first it just kind of sounds like, okay, we've got a bunch of rock stars that think too much of themselves, and somebody doesn't like brown M&Ms, so they want somebody to go through and sort out the M&Ms. And what they explained their reasoning for it is there were in this rider, which is many, many pages of documents, how everything needed to be set up. The M&Ms weren't necessarily that important to them. It didn't matter. I don't think anyone was just like, they couldn't stand brown M&Ms. But if they got to a venue and discovered that there were brown M&Ms, they knew that everything else in that rider, they needed to double check. And I believe it was actually Van Halen had some, it was one group, I think it was Van Halen. They had sent the rider with all the information and people had just skimmed it, not done it, not looked over what the weight requirements were for all the equipment they were bringing in. And they ended up like the stage sunk down into the ground because it wasn't separate. So it was their way of kind of a red flag. If there's brown M&Ms, it means people did not read the rider. So who knows what's going to happen with the electrical. You know, there's all these things we need to really watch out for because it means people weren't paying attention. And like that, daily meetings where people can't communicate face-to-face, for me, are like finding brown M&Ms. If I go into a team and something's happening, like the people standing in the hall talking on the phone, that was a pretty obvious one, but that's like finding the brown M&Ms. It's like they don't know what's behind what they're trying to do. We're probably going to find a lot of other problems as well. So what are we hoping to achieve with our daily face-to-face meeting? So I would say what we're trying to do, and it sounds kind of obvious, but we want to have communication. Now, this is important because the 3 questions, somebody just mentioned they didn't like the 3 questions. If you're just asking the 3 questions and people are rattling it off and no one's even listening to what the person says, you're probably not achieving communication. You may have people talking, but that's different than actually achieving communication. And this is kind of gets back to it being messy. If no one's interrupting and saying, wait, what did you say? Is that right? How does that relate to the sentence? Make sure you talk to Bob because Bob said he had that happen last week and he didn't run into the problems. If those types of things aren't happening, then you're probably not communicating. People are just talking. And when you get to the 3 questions, if the 3 questions are being used just for people to make sure that they're being busy, you're probably not achieving the purpose of a daily face-to-face meeting. So what can we get from communication? We should be getting efficient work out of it. Now notice, efficient work, not efficient status reports. So here's the, if the goal is just to tell people what was going on, that's not trying to get efficient work. So what's efficient work? Well, here's efficient work. We've got these things that need to be done, and we need to get them over to here. That's efficient. That's the work. We need to get it from there to here, to where it's deployed to production, and we're delighting our customer. Getting them deployed to production. And I see, okay, you're saying that you don't use the 3 questions. And it's not that I'm against the 3 questions, but I think the 3 questions can become very, very rote to where you're not actually getting the value out of your meeting that you could be getting out of it. And I was going to do a thing here. This is interesting site. I'm going to go and skip this, so we'll have some time for questions stuff at the end. But just kind of showing that what you're trying to do is get flow. So this is a traffic simulation. You go through and you get the rings, and if you try to do too many things at one time, you actually slow it down. So that's one thing that should be happening in your daily face-to-face meeting, is a focus to figure out what you can actually finish. Now the 3 questions, and if you haven't seen them before, but the 3 questions are, everybody goes around and answers the question, what did you do yesterday? What will you do today? And do you have any impediments? This can be useful information, but there's a couple things that happen with it. It could be useful, but imagine that you're in a situation where you're in the middle of your daily stand-up and the fire alarm goes off. Okay, so you're in the middle and everybody's going around asking those 3 questions, and the fire alarm goes off, and so everybody's gone, has to leave the building, and you don't reconvene. Everybody goes back to their desk or wherever they work at after that. If your stand-up got cut short at 5 minutes, how likely is it that you would come up with a plan for the most important work for the day if you were using the, well, actually, this could just be about your current meeting. Well, let's tune it to, if you're asking the 3 questions, going around by person and asking the 3 questions, how likely is it that you would have come up with a plan for the most important work for the day? Oh, Maureen, that's great. That's like not finding brown M&Ms, right? That means they're doing things that are useful. Okay, so it looks like most of us are leaning toward unlikely. I think we may be looking, well, how long is it going to take? 5 minutes, 15 minutes. We've covered about a third of it, so there's about 30% chance we will happen to hit the stuff that's most important for the day. But we've also got some people that think it's very, very likely because of however things are working. So the 3 questions can be very useful, but often that's just a way to make sure that people are busy. And we need to really be careful that we're not trying to manage by making people look busy. And I think oftentimes the 3 questions are a way to make sure that people are doing things rather than making sure that the most important things are being done. So if I go into a team, so oftentimes when I'm going coaching, I'm going in and I'm like working with the developers. And if we're starting from a place where they're asking the 3 questions, I know for me it's like, okay, I need to make sure I've got good things to say. What are we going to do? Do this. I did this yesterday. Here's what I'm doing. Do I have anything blocking me? And I go, and it's a very nervous thing to go into it. Now, I think one of the reasons some people might like asking the 3 questions is precisely because it does that. It gets people to stop and think, okay, am I actually doing something that I'm proud to tell everybody else what I'm doing? On the other hand, it also makes it easier to try to come up with things that sound important that just eat up people's time rather than things that we're actually communicating around how we need to deliver this software and how to work together efficiently. So if the 3 questions are being used in a way just to make sure that people are busy, you're probably missing out on the ability to actually collaborate. So how could the daily face-to-face meetings prioritize the most important thing? Well, I want to suggest that daily face-to-face meetings often can be much improved by doing a story-based daily face-to-face meeting. Because keep in mind, if we're trying to make sure that everyone's busy, it makes perfect sense to go around and ask every person what they've been doing. However, if we're trying to efficiently deliver work for our organization to satisfy the customer, it may make more sense to concentrate, to let the work dictate the way we go through talking about what we're going to do for the day. So, one hand, let's make sure everybody's really busy, make sure they did things yesterday, make sure they've got a good, they plan to be busy today, and find out if there's anything in their way. Not necessarily the worst thing you could do, but it's not built around how do we work together as a team efficiently. The 3 questions often pushes you toward people working more in silos and more on trying to be busy and less on, it doesn't matter if I'm busy. What matters is, are we working as a team together to deliver what the customer needs and what they want for? So let's take a look at this as an example. So if we kind of take the Agile mantra, stop starting and start finishing, and here's all of our work on the board. What do we most want to talk about? Well, we could go over here to this blue stuff and say, actually the question I want to ask is, what story can we get return on investment from the soonest, right? Would it be the ones way over there in the ready column? Would it be the ones that we're getting ready to work on requirements for? Or would it likely be the ones over here where we're getting ready to test stuff? And it's going to be the ones that we can do. The ones that are testing, we've already made a big investment in. That's where we should really, really be focusing. If we have to come up with a plan for today and the fire alarm goes off, I would want to make sure that we have a plan for how we're going to get these things in testing over into done. If instead we spend all of our time talking about the requirements, how we're going to work on the requirements, it's not that knowing what we're going to do on the requirements is a bad thing, but we've decided to focus on something that has a lot longer lead time before we can actually get value from it, at the expense of working on the stuff in testing that we can get value from very, very quickly, hopefully today or in the next day or in the next week. This is the stuff that's going to delight our customers sooner, the things in the test column that we can get to done, rather than the requirements, even if the requirements are very important. And this difference here, I think, is really important to think that it's not that that's a bad thing to talk about. Because oftentimes I think, is this good or is it bad? No, talking about the requirements is a very good thing. We want to kind of know what our plan is for that. But there's a better thing we could talk about because it gives us a faster return on investment, and that's the things in the testing column. So imagine this scenario. I think this is a scenario when I put these slides on, I've just got a random shoe. I was like, that meant something to me, something very significant when I put it up here. What was I thinking? Because it was important. And I think here's the scenario. So if you are at a shoe store, so let's say you've got a shoe store. Imagine you've got a shoe store, and there's lots of customers in different places, and you want to work efficiently. So we've got customers in these different places, right? We've got some customers that are outside of the store. We've got some that are standing at the checkout line. We've got some that are just inside the door. Some are shopping, and then some are done and headed out. So let's say that you're in the store and you're working in the store. Where should you focus your efforts? Where's the first place you should start? Well, you could say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to run outside the store and try to get those people to come in. That's not necessarily a bad thing to do. It's really friendly, encouraging people to come into your store and stuff. But imagine if that's happening at the expense of the person that's at the checkout counter. The person at the checkout counter is standing there, money in hand, ready to give you money for your product. This is how you get a return on investment. If you prioritize the other good stuff, the people outside the store, over the people that are ready to hand you money, that's probably not going to be beneficial to you in the long term. It's not that dealing with people just inside the door or the people taking care of people shopping, but the people what you want to prioritize is at the checkout. The thing that's going to actually put money into your cash register. You're putting it in your pocket. You might get arrested for theft depending on whether you own the store or not. But the thing that's actually going to get a return on investment to you. So it's the same way when we're thinking of the way that we want to approach our daily face-to-face meeting, where we want to spend most of our time. The thing we want to focus for is, what can we do today? We don't want to worry about people that are outside the door, or we don't want to spend all the time worrying about people that are outside the door at the expense of people that are at the checkout. There's a game, I don't know if anybody's played this, but Overcooked is a game where I think this is the one that lets us have up to 8. Was it 4 people or 8 people? Anyway, you have a bunch of people all playing together on the same board trying to cook at a restaurant. And I like to imagine that somewhere this is there are robots that you're actually controlling, and there's a restaurant out there, and this is their goal to reduce their labor costs, is you're actually, all these people in these games are controlling the things. That's probably not actually the case. Anyway, Overcooked, you've got to collaborate with your team to try to get stuff done. I think this is a great example. If you've got something, you could start a new plate, but you've got a plate that's already almost done. You want to finish that plate and go ahead and get it ready to deliver and get it to done, because you may run out of time. There's all these things that could happen. So Overcooked is a great game to kind of reference and think about, is your daily face-to-face working in a way that with Overcooked you'd get the highest score, or are you doing things in an improper order? Jack says, we walk the board 3 times a week, do it person by person twice a week. There's benefits to both approaches, in my opinion. And I think that's absolutely true. One thing that I think is very valuable, kind of switching back and forth, is to get people to stop and ask, why are we doing this meeting? Now, the most mature Agile teams I've seen end up more in this board space and less in the asking people what they're doing space. I think because the what are people doing comes out when you've got an efficient team walking across the board, starting on the right and working across. But I have been on some teams where we were walking the board. I was like, we may want to bring back the 3 questions every once in a while just to make sure that we're mixing things up enough that people are paying attention, and that they're seeing why this is valuable. So why is this approach we're talking about, starting on the right and trying to find a way to deliver it? Why is that hard? And I want to recognize that this can be a very difficult thing to do for a lot of teams. One piece of it is that I think people want to have their story that they started with and they deliver it, rather than regrouping every day and saying, how do we get this stuff right? And maybe you worked on it yesterday, so maybe that makes sense for you to work on it today, but maybe something's changed. Maybe you've got a doctor's appointment at 9 o'clock and don't expect to be here for the rest of the day. So let's let somebody else take this, and there's something else that we can use you on, that you can help us deliver on more effectively than if we put you on this particular story again. So most code isn't going to immediately benefit the customer. And this is one of the things that makes it kind of hard to feel like we're doing the right thing when we're starting on the right-hand side of the board. If there's a customer standing there waving money at us, it's easy to see that that's like very important. But if they're waving money at us that we know they're not going to give us for 2 weeks, we might be less likely to go take, maybe it feels like we should go take care of the shopping or something else instead. Okay, so quiz question for you again. Get ready. Remember, we're giving away a copy of the Starting Agile book. What did Mark say is an advantage of story-based face-to-face over person-based face-to-face? Introverts don't have to speak. It focuses the team on how to collaborate to deliver the next item. It requires fewer donuts, or it will confuse corporate spies. On how to, I need to change that. But yes, it focuses the team on how to collaborate to deliver the next item. It focuses on the unit of work that we're actually delivering. And the more we can focus on the way that we deliver value, the easier it is to discover things that aren't necessarily working out, that aren't working toward our efficiency or aren't working in the best interest of the customers we're trying to deliver for. So, who is getting value from the meeting? And I've seen a lot of meetings where there was one team I'm thinking of that we, when I first started working with the team, there was a scrum master that would come in. She would say, it's time for the daily stand-up. She'd get everybody standing up. She'd go around and ask, I think she'd actually point at people, I remember, ask them their 3 questions. And watching her, I was like, I don't think any of this is sinking in. I don't think she has any idea what these people are saying, what it means for them to say everything. She'd ask the 3 questions, say, okay, that's good, daily stand-up is over, and then she'd go back to her desk and play solitaire on the computer. And aside from, last week we talked about secrets of Scrum Masters, aside from not being an effective Scrum Master, the team was just giving her status reports. They weren't working with each other, there were no questions, it was just a rote recital of things that no one was paying attention to. So if you're in that situation, it's pretty easy to see why people aren't engaged. They're not getting any value from it. So why aren't people engaged? Well, usually it's because they don't think it's valuable. If people don't think a meeting is valuable, it's going to be hard to keep them engaged. So oftentimes what people do is they ask themselves, I've talked to Scrum Masters and they're like, wow, people don't think this is valuable. How can we convince them it's valuable? That's probably not the question. What we probably want to do is say, how do we make sure it actually is valuable? Are the daily stand-ups being done in a way that actually make an impactful difference in the way that people do their work, make things go smoother, make their lives easier, and make them better at delivering for the customer, which should make the customer happy and the developers and everyone delivering happy as well? you need to fix this first. You need to start out by figuring out how to make sure it actually is valuable. And one big piece of that is to make sure that you and everybody recognizes that the daily stand-up is not a status update. The team should value being able to coordinate together. So the question is, do you have a team or just a group of individuals working on things? Is the team collaboratively delivering the best return on investment, or are individuals just working on a list of tasks? Now, this is a very, very big difference between these two things. And it's very easy to be down here, just individuals working through their list of tasks, and say that we're agile because we're having a daily stand-up meeting where everybody goes around and asks 3 questions. But if you have a team that's actually collaboratively working together to get the best return on investment, the daily face-to-face meeting becomes very, very, very important and very, very valuable. I've got that on the next slide. So here's an example. Ryan Latta was talking about when he was working with he comes and does various things, coaching things. But one thing he was saying is he was working with this team that was really struggling with their daily face-to-face, their daily stand-up meeting. So he was helping facilitate those meetings. And so he comes in and he realized everyone was just looking at him and answering the 3 questions. Because I think he was taking the role of Scrum Master. So everybody's just staring at him. And he was like, so the team's not collaborating. So he started doing this. When somebody would just stare at him and not talk to the rest of the team, he'd just turn his back on him. Like this, and look at something else. I mean, he was still listening and everything, but he just turned their back on, which completely confused the people on the team, right? They were used to the idea of the daily face-to-face meeting being, we sit here and we tell Ryan what we're doing, or tell whoever is the Scrum Master, we tell them what we did yesterday, what we're going to do today, and if there's any blockers or whatever format they were. And can you imagine being in that situation, and your idea has been, whatever you've been taught, your idea is the way these meetings work is we tell that person what we did. And all of a sudden that person just goes like this. And looks at the board or something. They're not looking at you at all. And then the person, he said they didn't know where to look. They couldn't look at him anymore because he wasn't making eye. So they started looking at the other team members. And that was a very healthy thing for the team to start thinking about, oh, I'm talking to the rest of the team. I'm not just talking to the Scrum Master that was here. I think another thing he talked about one time is just, he just left the room. He got everything started and people started talking directly to him, so he just walk out and leave. And it's funny to imagine these things. I still smile while thinking of it. But the whole point is to switch things up enough that people have to stop and think about, why are we doing this? Who should I be talking to? What's the value? Is the value here just to tell the Scrum Master what we did? Or is the value here to actually collaborate within the team? Had an example. Okay, so face-to-face for change management. I was working with on a government project that was notorious for very, very slow change management. And even when you tried to do it slow, it often had catastrophic results where data would get corrupted. I mean, there were lots of things that were bad things that were happening in this piece of software that we were replacing. And so we recognized that the change management was a big place that we were introducing lots of risk. It was also a big place that was holding things up in the way the software had been delivered in the past. So what we did is we started asking ourselves, how can we make that change management more valuable? And so we started having a face-to-face meeting. We invited change management to participate in the daily face-to-face meeting. And the logic behind that was, before we would give them, or before the previous software, they'd batch up huge numbers of changes, like 6 months worth of changes, or maybe smaller groups, but large amounts of changes, and then go to the change management and say, is this safe to deploy? And change management didn't have very much context for it. I mean, it was a very dangerous thing because they were getting so many changes at one time. It was hard to understand how they interacted. And it was very hard for change management to really understand the details. And if they did have something that they wanted to change, by that point, it was too late. It had already been created. So they had to go back and say, no, it should have been done like this. And then developers would go back in and grumbling, tear the system apart and try to put it back together to make the change management people happy. It would often end up even worse than what they had before without them knowing it, because they had some side effect that, I mean, you can imagine. So we decided to shift left by asking them to be at the daily face-to-face meeting. So before, And before, under the best scenario, the way it would work is we'd get all the way through, or the way that this organization approached software is you'd get everything all the way through, get it through testing, and then you'd have to wait 2 weeks for a security review meeting. By people that had no idea why decisions were made or how it was constructed as we're doing it. So we tried to shift left and we said, okay, what if we bring security in so they can hear what we're talking about daily as we decide what we're going to work on? So in that case, security started asking questions at daily stand-ups up front to understand the risks. And things would happen and they'd say, oh, okay, you know what? If you do it this way that you just described, that's going to trigger these other change management stuff because you're going to be adding a new role and that has to be approved through these channels. And then the team would go, oh, you know what? If that's the case, then maybe we should do it this other way where we don't need to add a new role for it. And it will accomplish the same thing. We just haven't thought about the security implications of that. And they're like, okay, that's great. That happened before they wrote any code. Or what might happen is the business that was there might say, oh, you know what? If that's going to create these security things that we've got to go through that will be more difficult, that kind of lowers the priority of this being the next story. Let's do this other story instead, and let's defer on this one because we thought it would be just really, really easy, but it sounds like there's going to be more governance around it. So let's do this other thing because getting this other thing sooner is more valuable than getting this thing with the amount of time it will take. And we'll come back to it when it becomes the next most important thing. So we'd go through this process. They'd ask questions up front. When the developers were doing things, they could ask questions at the daily face-to-face meeting of the change management people. If there was any security stuff, the security people could overhear anything that the team was coordinating around, any things they were running into, and they could address the security concerns and ask for feedback as they did the development work. So then by the time we got over here, and we had tested and say, okay, we're everything good. Security understood the full history of that story. They understood what had been done. They may have even been involved in some of the testing. They knew that they had steered this piece this way and this piece this way. And so they were very, very comfortable approving that story, which then got deployed on through to production without needing to, in a small piece, instead of batching a huge number of things together and then just hoping that everything worked okay when we went to deployment. And there's no way we do deployment on a Monday because it might shut down the system. So you'd want to do it on a Friday, and then people have to stay through the weekend, or at least plan on potentially staying through the weekend in case something goes down. And it just made for a much better, smoother flow of how things were delivered. And it made the security people's life a whole lot easier because they were spending 15 minutes a day to do what normally would have taken them a very, very stressful amount of trying to understand things that were difficult to understand, that they didn't have the context for, under the gun because everybody's pressuring them to get it done so it can be delivered. So it worked out a lot better. And this was all done by just bringing people into the daily face-to-face meetings so we could push the value of what they were providing to the left. Okay, so question for you. It's time for your daily face-to-face meeting, but the Scrum Master hasn't arrived. What happens? What will happen in your particular organization? So this is good. It looks like about half of us are in places where somebody on the team will just pick it up, or there's the vast majority, somebody is going to pick it up and run the meeting. It's not just going to sit there. Very few of us are a place where the team will just wait for the Scrum Master to arrive or decide whether the Scrum Master has a master's or PhD or bachelor's, and depending on that, decide how long they have to wait before they leave. That type of situation is probably the worst because that means that they think they're doing it for the Scrum Master rather than something that they're going to get out of themselves. And the point I want to make here is there should be shared ownership of this meeting. If there's not shared ownership of the meeting, then it probably means that people are not feeling that it's valuable, or you haven't given them, somehow they haven't been given the ability to say, this is our meeting rather than it's a meeting that we are attending. And there's a huge difference between a meeting that we are attending because we all think this it's important and are getting value from it, and a meeting we're attending because somebody told us we had to come to it. So an idea that I've seen work well on some teams is a random team member runs the meeting. So in this case, one team I'm thinking of, we would set it up to where in our chat channel, or like our Slack channel, about 15 minutes before the meeting, it would list 3 names, 1, 2, 3, in order. And the idea was that the person at the top of the list, if they were available and could do it, they would be the one that ran the meeting. If they weren't there or had something going on, for some reason they couldn't, maybe they were coming late, then person number 2 would take it. And that did a huge, that made a huge shift for the team in the idea of this being shared ownership. Because when everybody has to get used to facilitating the meeting or emceeing the meeting, it made it to where they all saw the meeting as more for them. Tom W. said he did the last person to arrive. I like that. Although they may be the person that's most discombobulated and coming in if they got stuck in traffic or something. But that's an idea. I was managing a department one time, and there was one individual that would almost always show up late, particularly on days that we were having we'd have a once a week meeting. It wasn't a development group. There were developers in it, but we did other things as well. And so it's just our weekly staff meeting. He'd always show up late. And so one day I talked to him about it, but we still weren't getting anywhere. I was like, okay, is there any way I can just make it to where somehow there's some discomfort at showing up late? And so we get there for one meeting, and it's on the time that we're ready to stop. It's like, okay, everybody go get in your cars. We're going down to the coffee shop. Or actually, this location had a coffee shop. So we went to the coffee shop. So he shows up in his regular, 5-10 minutes late, and there's no one there. They're gone. We didn't leave him a note or anything. Everybody comes back with coffee. And but it was a way just to try to help emphasize, okay, we're starting at this time, and you may miss out if you're not here. But this shared responsibility is a very important aspect of the daily face-to-face meeting. Well, shared responsibility for what? Is it shared responsibility for finishing development work? Is it shared responsibility for getting code working in QA? Is it shared responsibility for running code in production? I would say it's actually this last one, which is shared responsibility for delighting the customer with new functionality. Now, we will probably have to do all those other things in order to delight the customer with new functionality. But if we don't focus on this, we might feel very good about being responsible about getting code to work in QA without any idea of whether the customer actually wants the code that we're delivering to QA. The stand-up should help the team do this. And I think this is an important thing to talk to your team about is the stand-up actually helping us better delight the customer with new functionality? And if it's not, what can we do differently? And an important thing to realize here, I mentioned about the team, it may be messy, the way that the teams work together, or the way that a particular team implements their daily stand-up, but it can also look very different from team to team. I think there's value in keeping it at 15 minutes, but if your team is like, 17 and a half minutes really gives us a lot more value than 15 minutes, that's great. You may find teams do things very, very differently because, and if they can justify the reason we're doing this, because this will help us better coordinate our work to delight the customer with new functionality, there may be a good reason to at least try it as an experiment. And it's okay if teams are doing different things, or it's okay if teams have stand-ups that look different, because you've got different people, different circumstances, different outside stakeholders, different customers often, in different ways that you're providing them with value. So some of the things we've talked about, like walking the board and different things like that, I think can be a very valuable place to start. But if you've got people actually engaged, they may come up with ideas of things to try that look very, very different. And if it's helping the team organize around delighting the customer with new functionality, you ought to at least try it and see if there's any side effects. Okay, so a couple things to avoid. Avoid being in a situation where the face-to-face meeting is to just give the Scrum Master an update. Like we've talked about that several times. Hang on, we'll see there. I've got a team that stays on the calls after stand-up for hours, just quietly working, randomly coming off mute to ask questions or share. So yes, and actually I will mention that oftentimes the biggest value of the daily face-to-face meeting is for people to figure out what conversations they need to have next. If we've talked through something and I realize that you did this 2 weeks ago and ran into the same problem that I'm running into, I should reach out and talk to you. So those type of coordination. And the thing about staying on the call, the most effective remote teams that I've seen actually keep a video window up. So you've got your window into the world where the rest of your teammates are on a separate screen, and they can see what you're doing. If you look like you're really intense or on the phone or something, maybe they won't interrupt you. If you look like you're available and you say, hey, did you run into this last week? I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And that can be a very effective way to work. a lot of people are just opposed to it because it feels creepy having somebody having a camera on you. But the teams I've seen where there's a high level of trust, and particularly small teams, like you got 5 or 6 people working like this, or maybe 3 or 4, it can be very effective. Also paired with like mob and ensemble programming. Anyway, back to things to avoid. Using the face-to-face meeting to give the Scrum Master an update. And the reason is because just giving the Scrum Master an update does not necessarily coordinate your work for the best delivery of what the customer needs. Waiting until the daily meeting to ask a question from another team member. I was working with a team in Kansas City, and there was an individual there, and he came in and said, okay, so how, I think we were still going around asking everybody what they did. It's like, I ran into this issue yesterday, and today I'm going to ask Bob how to fix that. And I wasn't wanting to call him out too badly, but it kind of came out that he had run into that issue an hour after the stand-up the day before. And I was like, you realize Bob is just in the room next to you. Like, he's in the team room right next to you. You're allowed to go talk to him. You don't have to wait till this stand-up meeting to ask him. But for some reason in his mind, he needed to wait till the next stand-up meeting to tell everyone that he had run into a problem, and then ask Bob to ask him. So and the point here being that if your daily meeting is becoming a reason not to collaborate immediately, that's a negative thing. That's not what the daily meeting is there for, is to give you an excuse not to talk to people other times. Using daily meeting to avoid deep collaboration. So if you're using the daily meeting saying we just collaborate by coming together here, and then everybody goes, puts on their headphones, works in their silo, if the daily meeting is encouraging that type of behavior, or people are using the daily meeting as an excuse for that type of behavior of not doing deep collaboration, then you probably need to try to adjust something. Another thing to avoid is only giving good news. The goal of the daily face-to-face meeting is not to just show everybody that nothing is going wrong, whether it is or not. The goal is to actually collaborate around problems and work things out, make sure that everybody's aware and that we're bringing the full collaborative power of the entire team toward delivering. We also want to make sure it's not ignoring opportunities to provide better return on investment for the customer. This kind of goes back to the thing of, if everybody answers 3 questions for the Scrum Master, and that's not actually helping us provide better return on investment for the customer, the fact that we've always done it this way should not be an impediment for us to try something different. Okay, back to I think I've got a few, what's here? Okay, yes, so I think at this point we're going to look at a few more questions here. We'll see who's got the leaderboard, so get ready. Looks like there's 77 people in. Get your clicking fingers ready. And next question. What did Mark say was like Van Halen finding brown M&Ms in their green room? Was it like Scrum meetings where people ride brooms, teams that select too many stories, daily stand-ups that aren't face-to-face, or managers being present in the daily stand-up meetings? What did I say was like Van Halen finding brown M&Ms in their green room? And yes, daily stand-ups that aren't face-to-face. And the reason I said that is because for Van Halen, seeing the brown M&Ms meant that people weren't necessarily, they may have been doing some things right, but they didn't really know why they were doing it. They didn't know that the writer was actually probably full of that there was a reason for information in the writer. And if they were willing to say, oh, you know what, it doesn't matter, they can eat the brown M&Ms, they may have also said that, oh, you know what, yeah, we will be fine hanging 10,000 pounds of equipment from the rafters. We don't know how much care, but surely that will be okay too. So daily stand-ups that aren't face-to-face are kind of an indicator that there may be other things that the team is doing that aren't actually being driven by the intent behind the Agile principles. And they may be doing things for other reasons or not really caring. Okay, Megan's top spot, followed by Jake, Andrew, Kendi, and Frank E. Next question. What did Mark say was the most important shared responsibility that the daily stand-ups should enable? Is it finished coding, deploying to QA, delighting the customer with new functionality, or deploying to production? What did Mark say was the most important shared responsibility that a daily stand-up should enable? All of these things may be good, but yes, delighting the customer with new functionality is the most important shared responsibility of the daily stand-up. Now, we will probably do that by deploying to production, but the difference here is deploying to production, if we deploy stuff to production that doesn't benefit the customer or isn't something the customer wants, that's not going to be delighting the customer with new functionality. Which isn't to say we're never going to deploy something to production that is behind the scenes that the customer can't necessarily touch themselves, but we want to be focused on delighting the customer with new functionality. This should do some things like keep the meetings focused on how is the customer going to benefit from this? Because it's really easy to do something that the developers can see, and I fall into this as well myself. The developers see as being an improvement and moving forward, but we deliver and really the customer doesn't care about because it's not something they want to do. Or it doesn't fix their main pain point. Or it's something like, well, yes, that would be valuable if I could do this other thing. But since I can't do this other thing, that's not valuable to me at all. So it should be really, the daily face-to-face should be making us really think about how is the customer going to use this, so we don't spend a lot of time producing something and delivering something that the customer can't actually get value from. Kennedy pulls in the top spot, followed by Megan, Jess, Frank, and Kayla. Next question. If people aren't engaged in the daily face-to-face meeting, what should you do? Should we put them on a performance improvement plan? Bring donuts if in person, or just eat a donut on camera if remote? Convince them the meeting is valuable, or fix the meetings to make them valuable? And yes, like we talked about, the goal should be to fix the meetings to make them valuable. And now, convincing them the meeting's valuable is, that's really, really close. But I want to encourage us to think, if people don't feel something is valuable, we shouldn't start with the idea that we need to convince them it's valuable. We need to first go back and see, is there anything that we're doing that if we did differently would make this valuable to them? What's important to these people that they don't feel they're getting? And if the meeting's being, it's not to say there might be some people with bad attitudes, they're going to just say, oh, it's never valuable to me, even if they are getting value out of it. But start by trying to fix the meeting to make them valuable. Figure out why it is that this 15 minutes of day that should be some of the most productive time in their day, why are they not seeing that as being valuable? Okay, Kennedy takes the top spot. Congratulations. The hardest question evidently was who has no brown M&Ms on the concert rider. So Kennedy, send me an email. Actually, in case you don't, I'll put my email here. Oops. There's my email. Send me an email with your address and we will get a copy of the book headed your way. Thank you everybody for coming. I am going to stop the streaming here that goes to YouTube and then see if anybody's got any questions.